Welcome again to the Press Box Podcast. I'm Ralph Miranda, my co-host Joseph Miranda, and today we're going to be talking Major League Baseball, and we're only about 8 days away from the start of the season. It starts here at the end of March. Baseball's right around the corner. We're going to talk everything baseball. We're going to give you a division by division breakdown. We're going to talk about our favorites to win the division, talk about some key players, talk about our favorites to make the wild card spots in baseball. And we're going to talk about some key issues in baseball right now, some things that they're trying to do to grow the game or make the game a little bit more appealing to a diverse audience. And we'll also talk a little bit about some players. And we'll also end with a nice rapid fire segment, kind of like we do with our guests, to kind of give you the flavor of some of the things that we as sports fans like or appreciate in the world of baseball, especially. I want to remember to mention our sponsor, Bonus Room Art. You can go to www.bonusroomart.com. Check out all his prints. There's a media tab as well. Check out our producer Nathan's progress on some of his prints. Also, you can go to my blog, theoldlinebacker.com. That's HTTPS theoldlinebacker.com, for you can listen to the podcast there as well as on iTunes and Stitcher, as well as get a lot of interest and information in the world of sports and some different topics. So without further ado, Joseph and I are ready to delve into our 2018 Major League Baseball preview.
All right, in today's episode of the Press Box Podcast, it is our Major League Baseball preview episode, as we are just a little over a week away from MLB opening day, which starts early this year in late March. And we talk a lot of different sports on the podcast, but for me personally, baseball is my favorite sport, so this is a good episode for me. And I know you're a baseball fan as well. Not as much as not as much as the NFL, obviously, but it's always exciting. As long as you have some interest in baseball, when spring training comes to an end, you get that opening day feeling coming soon, I think.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, you don't have to be a tremendous fan of baseball to know. I mean, baseball is kind of like the acknowledgement that the winter's over and springtime is coming, and the summer's around the corner. So, there's nothing like a baseball game in June or July when there's nothing else going on and you turn on the TV and you can watch the baseball game. It's a great sport. It's still America's pastime. There's no question about that. I will agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to start with, I want to start by taking a look at some of the divisions here. So we'll break this down kind of division by division here and talk a little bit about each of those, and then maybe get into some individual players and some predictions towards the end. But we'll start with the American League East is what we'll look at first here. And we've established numerous times in the podcast that you're originally from New York and are a huge New York Giants fan, but the Yankees also have deep roots with you. So anytime you talk about the AL East, you're going to talk about the Yankees, especially with who they added this offseason. In the reigning National League MVP, Giancarlo Stanton. I think they have to be the favorites right now in that division. I think that Boston's going to be there. They have a lot of good players, a lot of young players, and I think it's really a battle between those two. It's kind of like it has been in classic years past when that rivalry was at its peak.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think a few years ago. It wasn't that long ago, maybe 3 years ago, I think, where the Blue Jays made a nice little run,
right?
And the Orioles made a nice little run. I think they were in the American League Championship Series a couple years ago. But those teams are kind of like an ebb and a flow, and the Yankees. The Yankees have been able to do something that we talked about this that was really unimaginable. I mean, they rebuilt on the fly. I mean, 2 years ago in 2016, I guess, or 15 and 16. I mean, the Yankees were not a very good baseball team. I mean, They had Jeter had retired. They had aging A-Rod. I mean, they really Teixeira was looking pretty bad with his injuries.
Mhm.
And in a matter of 1 year, Brian Cashman, for as much as I don't like the guy, transformed the team. And now they've got probably one of the youngest, most exciting teams in Major League Baseball, and they still have probably the best bullpen in Major League Baseball. So I have to agree with you that they would have to be the odds-on favorite in the East. I agree that Boston has a lot of good players. For Boston, it's just a matter of putting it all together and getting that pitching and timely hitting. I think that's one thing that Boston lacked last year was the ability to hit the ball when they had to hit the ball. All right. But I agree. I think Toronto's on the downswing. Baltimore is on the downswing. And Tampa, they've pretty much traded everybody away. So I think it's going to be a rough year for them.
Yeah, I think that when you look at Tampa and Baltimore specifically, I think they're pretty safe, pretty safe to count them out. Toronto's interesting in just that they have some players that if they perform like they either have in the past or may be capable of, they can make it interesting. They still have Josh Donaldson. They re-signed him to I think a new deal. I'm not sure the years, but he's a former MVP. They still have Tulowitzki, who you can make the case in 2012 to 14, he was maybe the best player in baseball, so he's still there. I don't know how much he has left. And then they have Curtis Granderson as well, so they have some guys that can swing a little bit. Their pitching staff is going to be their downfall, though, I think. And
Right.
ultimately, I just don't think they have enough. But more specifically with the Yankees, they have that. They're going to have the back-to-back punch of Stanton and Judge. How do you see that playing out? Do you think that um, it's going to be as formidable as everybody thinks, or do you think that Stan will have some trouble adjusting to the American League pitching and just seeing guys that he hasn't seen before? Do you think that's a little bit overrated?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit overrated. I think it'll take him a little while to adjust, only because he may have seen these pitchers. Well, we've had interleague play, all right.
Oh, that's
So
true.
so
That's
he
true.
so he's been able to see some of them at least one
Right.
or two times.
Right.
But yeah, I think it'll take him a little while. But I think the thing, he no matter where you bat the guy, I mean, who are you going to pitch to in that lineup? I mean, that's the thing that's so hard to figure out. And if Stanton's patient, if they want to walk him, fine, you pitch to Judge. You want to walk to Judge, you pitch to Sanchez. I mean, it's going to be hard for pitchers to get him out, and he's such a good hitter that I really don't think he's going to have trouble adjusting to the pitching that he's going to be facing in the American League. I think, if anything, the thing that he's going to have trouble adjusting to is maybe the DH role, only because he's never done that,
Right.
and also maybe playing left field if he has to play left field. But I don't think those are big concerns for Aaron Boone at this particular time.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that too. And you just mentioned something there at the very end that I forgot that Aaron Boone takes over as manager from Joe Girardi, which in this case, I'm not sure that a manager makes that much difference in terms of wins for the Yankees, but it's going to obviously be their players that that affect this one. But so I think you and I are in agreement that the Yankees win this division then ultimately.
Yeah, I think they do. I think the Yankees. I think the Red Sox will give them a battle, but
Right.
I think ultimately the Yankees will pull away. And if the Yankees get any kind of production at all out of their starting pitching, and when I say any production, I mean if they have their starters win 13, 14, 15 ball games, they're going to run away with it.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So we like the Yankees in that division. Moving over to the Central now. You have a division where a couple of years ago the Royals seemed to own that division. They got to back-to-back World Series and they won one of them. But more recently, it's been the Indians that have kind of taken control of that division. You'd have to think that going in, they're the consensus favorites to win the division again. Um, but I think you got to look at some teams like the White Sox. You have a lot of young players who really are um, probably a year or two away from being formidable. Specifically they have Yohan Moncada, who was just a year or two ago the top prospect in baseball they got from the Red Sox. Also got some pitching from the Red Sox that's going to come around soon. So they're going to be interesting. But I think it's really the Indians again when you look at that division.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Cleveland has shown that uh, their lineup is very formidable. I mean, look at last year. I mean, they won what, 22 straight, no, 20,
Right,
25 straight ball games, right?
right, something like that.
And
Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, and let's face it, they should have put the Yankees away. They had them down 2-0, so they should have put the Yankees away. And who knows if they would have done that when they faced the Astros. So they're still going to be very formidable. They still have some tremendous pitching. They have Kluber, their number one guy that has shown to be quite an ace when he's on the mound in pressure situations in the playoffs. So I think you got to make the Indians a favorite. I think I agree with you on the White Sox. Young upcoming team. I don't think this is their year. I think the Twins. The Twins made a little bit of a push last year for the playoffs. In
Right.
fact, I mean, I don't
They
think they
got
were eliminated to.
they got in.
Yeah,
They played the Yankees in the one game
that's
playoffs.
right. That's right. That's right. I forgot all about that. That's exactly right. We were watching. We were watching that game
Yeah.
here in California. Yeah. So the Twins actually made the playoffs as a wild card. So I mean, I guess you could argue they made a nice push, towards the end to get in there.
Right.
So yeah, I think they have a chance to maybe push the Indians a little bit, but assuming the Indian hitters and pitchers produce like they did last year, they should win that division. And the Royals have sold a couple of their players off, traded them away, so I don't think they have any firepower to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, the Royals, they lost Eric Hosmer, who signed with the Padres.
Right.
And I mean, they re-signed Moustakas to a 1 year deal, but yeah, I think that their window is I think kind of closed for lack of a better term. And the Indians, just like they said, they bring everybody back. Kluber, who I believe was the Cy Young winner in the American League last year, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Yeah, they
He
have
was.
Lindor at shortstop, and outfield Brantley, and just a lot of good players that are gonna they're gonna be able to rely on to produce. And and I I just got talking about how managers don't mean all that much, but and I'm gonna say they have Terry Francona, who's got a lot of postseason managerial experience, which I'm gonna say now counts for something, even though I just said the managers don't count for something. So we'll see. We'll see.
But I agree with you on that. I really believe that, you know, let me step back. I think Tito Francona is a tremendous manager, and I think he helps. I think he gets the Indians 3, 4, 5 more wins, from making certain decisions. I think that's where Aaron Boone, you have to watch, is that will he make the right decisions? Because when you play 162 ball games, I mean, unless the Yankees do like they did in 1998 and win 114 ball games, I mean, he's going to have some situations where he's going to have to decide, do I pull this guy now or do I give him another inning? Who do I pinch hit in this situation? How do I play this particular team? I mean, there's going to be some key decisions that he's going to have to make. And outside of that, one of the things that Girardi did so well that I think was underrated was he managed that clubhouse so well. I mean, he was able to manage the egos. He was able to manage the younger players with some of the older players, and he was able to deal with the media so well. So I think, the jury's still out on Aaron Boone when it comes down to key situations like that. I just think he inherited such a great situation with the talent he has that, he won't have to be tested in that way. But with the Indians, I think Francona helps them, and I think one of the things that helps the Indians in that division is it's really full of small market teams, and we all know that their window is very short, 1 or 2 years, and then they can't afford to keep those guys.
Yeah, that's what, like you said, that's what happened with the Royals, who it was just about 2, maybe 3 years where they were on top there, and they kind of
Right.
fell back to the pack. So, okay, so if we like the Indians in that division, that leaves the AL West, who house the defending World Series champions, Houston Astros. So no surprise that they're going to be the favorite to win that division, considering they just won the
Yes.
World Series. And the big news for Houston is they did sign Altuve to that 5 year deal, a big free agent
Right.
contract. They've locked him up now. They have Correa under, I'm not sure his contract, but he's under club control for a little while. George Springer's still there, so they pretty much bring everybody back, and they have Verlander still as well under contract. So they're
Dallas
obviously
Keuchel.
right, Dallas Keuchel. So they're obviously going to be formidable. The Angels are a little interesting. They have Mike Trout still, who's, depending on who you talk to, maybe the best player in baseball. And then Otani, his first name escapes me right
Right.
now.
Right.
Who I think we talked about a couple months back on the podcast, just in terms of him trying to pitch and hit. This season. So and he's, I think, ranked the top prospect in baseball right now. So that's going to be interesting just to see how that plays out. And I think we both both felt like it's going to be pretty hard for him to do, and
Yes.
I think ultimately they'll end up just having him do one thing, most likely pitch, in my opinion. But
Right.
I think that the Indians are the only team that can really even give the Astros a run for their money in that division.
Which team?
The Angels, excuse me.
The Angels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. I think so. I think the A's. I mean, I don't think there's much to that team. I mean, they had a window a few years ago as well, and that window's closed. I just think that the Rangers. I mean, I don't see them really doing anything given the makeup of that team. So I would agree with you. I think the Astros are pretty much going to win that division, barring any key injuries. Again, we have to give that disclaimer,
Right.
barring. I mean, anything which we're going to get to in a minute when we go to the National League. The Dodgers just had a guy, their third baseman,
Justin Turner. Yeah.
yeah, Justin Turner hurt his wrist. Hopefully, he won't need surgery. But again, that's what I'm saying. Unless something happens to a key player or two, I think the Astros are going to win the West.
Yeah, absolutely. Another storyline that I thought was kind of cool from the West that it probably won't factor into the winning of the division as much is the Mariners signed Ichiro to a 1 year deal.
I saw
Um,
that.
what was it? I guess 18 years now after he made his debut there in '01 and won Rookie of the Year and really became a household name in baseball. And at this point, it's kind of legendary status. He has over 3,000 hits, and it's just cool to see him still playing. And he hasn't announced whether this is last year or not, but signs point towards that it could be, and he gets to do it back in Seattle. So that's kind of a neat storyline as well there with Ichiro, going back to the Mariners, I think.
That's a nice storyline, and I hope he does retire there at Seattle because he will have come full circle. And let's face it, I mean, Ichiro, he's a professional hitter. I mean, if you need some hits, I mean, I wouldn't even at 40 years old or 42 or
I
43,
think,
I wouldn't have any qualms bringing him in if I needed somebody to give me some hits.
yeah, and the thing is, he was when he came over and was a rookie in '01, he was I think what 27, 28 years old or
Right, right.
something like that. So I mean, if he was a guy that came over when he was 20, 22, he'd have over 4,000 hits right now, or something like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. He probably would be challenging Pete Rose's record.
Yeah, and by the way, this October he turns 45.
45. There you
so
go. So
so yeah,
so he's getting up there in age, no question about it.
right, absolutely. So okay, so I think we're in conjunction there with the West too, with the Astros as of right now.
We are.
So before we talk a little bit about the wild card, we'll go to the National League and
Right.
start in the East there. And we'll be specifically with the East, we'll be talking a little bit to our very own Uncle Joe as we did. I think it was December about the Nationals specifically.
Right.
And that that division, I think that I personally would favor the Nationals. I know the Mets have something to say about that because they think that they have their pitching back in line with Syndergaard and Harvey and DeGrom, and if those guys can be clicking, that you can't count them out. I think the Phillies are going to be bad, obviously, even though they just signed Arrieta from not away from the Cubs. He was a free agent, but they signed
Right.
Arrieta.
Right.
The Braves are in a rough spot right now.
Right.
And the Marlins are in a real tough spot to get rid of Stanton and
Right.
trying to rebuild the way they are. So it really comes down to the Nationals and Mets, and I think that Mets just aren't on the class are not are not in the same class as the Nationals right now, especially when it comes to offensive production.
Yeah, to quote the commissioner from any given Sunday, they're just not in your league, Christina. No, I agree with you there. I think the Nationals, again, if they stay healthy, they've got Scherzer, they've got Zimmerman, they got third base, they got or first base, whatever he plays. They got Gio Gonzalez. They got I mean, they've got a plethora of pitching. There's no question about that. Tanner Roark. The Nationals have the best pitching staff in the East, I think. And the reason I say that is because you don't know what you're going to get with the Mets pitchers. Okay,
Right.
I mean, if they all stay healthy and they all pitch the way they pitched back in 2015, the Mets could be a very dangerous club, especially if Cespedes, can stay healthy, which he has not been able to do very well the last couple of years either. So,
Right.
and if the Mets can figure out their first base and third base problem with David Wright being injured so much, the Mets have a chance to really contend. But it's all going to depend on their pitching. I mean, they've got to have good years from those guys, and they've got to stay healthy the entire year. Otherwise, you can forget it. But I agree with you there. It's the Mets and it's the Nationals for sure, and the Mets if the pitchers can stay healthy.
Yeah, and David Wright, his case is interesting because I saw something just the other day that he's been shut down for another 2 months, even though
Right,
there's nothing new or wrong with him. They said so. I think it was rotator cuff surgery and something done to his hip last September. After missing all of last season, he hasn't played in a game for them since 2016.
right.
And he's their captain. He's the Mets captain, but it doesn't look like he'll be back anytime soon.
Now,
And really, it might be it for him in terms of not only with the Mets, but in terms of baseball as well. If he can't turn it around this year, but yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's the pitching, and it is really up in the air. Those guys can be lights out like they were the year they got to the World Series, and they could struggle, and you could have some injuries, and I mean, theoretically, you could see some of those guys in the trading block come July 31st probably as well. So,
well,
um,
yeah, you're exactly right. And kind of in a very strange twist, I think, back in 2015 when Syndergaard and DeGrom and Matz were all really, really young guys, I think the success they had in 2015 might have actually hurt them, right? Because those guys had to pitch quite a bit throughout the latter half of the season, especially as we got into September, because they didn't really pull away in that division until about mid-September,
right.
right? They were neck and neck with the Nationals there for most of August and September and into July. So I think those young guys, I think they threw so many innings. And then when you throw in the divisional series, the league championship series, and the World Series, I think those guys threw so much that I think it hurt them a little bit. I think maybe they weren't ready to have that much work. If that it may sound crazy, but I just think the success maybe came too quickly for them. If that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, 'cause that's the thing that most organizations, especially with young pitchers or young prospects, they'll have an innings limit where they try to progress them in terms of, okay, this is their first year of the majors, second, third, fourth, or they increase the innings some each year. But when you're in a playoff World Series race, you can't really hold guys out of pitching because I mean that's the goal is to win the World Series. So it was good that they got there, but yeah, it certainly could have put them at a little bit of risk just because they haven't been exposed to pitching that many innings, especially high pressure innings at the highest level of baseball.
Right.
Yeah, so I think again we can both. This is our fourth agreement, but we both agree on the Nationals there, and
Yes.
we'll be talking some more Nationals of Bin for with Uncle Joe, to see
Yes, we will.
his thoughts after maybe 2 or so weeks of the season, when that happens. But moving on to the Central now, um, I guess the biggest story in that division is going to be the Cubs again because coming off the big World Series win in '16. Okay, first
Right.
obviously since 1908. Um, didn't have the same success last year. Um, they did the year before. They did get to the playoffs, but got beat by the Dodgers. Um, so I mean, how do you see that division playing out? Traditionally it's been the Cardinals were in control of that division for a little while now, or excuse me, for a little while a few years back, and I don't think they're at the level they quite once were.
No.
But they're still, you can never really count them out. They're not going to be a 60, 70 win team. So what's your take just initially looking at the Central?
I really think that of the divisions that we've talked about so far, the three of the American League and the National League East, I think the National League Central may actually end up being the most competitive division, really.
Yeah, yeah,
Because you look at the Cardinals, like you said, I mean, they've fallen on some hard times the last few years, but they still have a tremendous farm system. They still have tremendous management, and they've got a great manager. And I think that if some of their guys are getting a little old, some of their pitching hasn't performed quite like they've wanted to, and they've had some key injuries there. But I think the Cardinals very easily could win that division. The Cubs, I mean, let's face it, the Cubs still have a lot of talent. They may have lost Arrieta, but they still have tremendous pitching. They still got John Lester. They still have some tremendous pitching that could help them quite a bit down the stretch. And if they're key position players who performed very well in 2016 but had a drop last year, if they get back to their average type of a year that they should have, I think the Cubs, have a great chance to win that division. I
yeah.
think Cincinnati, I just don't think they have it. I don't think they have the pitching.
Right.
Pittsburgh, I think it's the same problem with Pittsburgh and who am I forgetting? The Brewers,
Yeah,
Milwaukee, right?
right.
I just, hey, the Brewers are an interesting club, though. I mean, I think the Brewers, they were in the race last year for a while as well, and ended up falling short. But they could make a little bit of run. So yeah, I think it's a very comfortable division, or excuse me, very competitive division. But I have to believe that the Cubs, probably have more talent than anybody else in the division.
Yeah, and you mentioned their pitching staff, which they've kind of upgraded this offseason. Lester's still there, who's their number one starter. They signed Yu Darvish
Right.
to the 6 year deal. Where I mean, ultimately it's probably a good sign. He's a good pitcher, but he certainly didn't impress me in the playoffs and World Series last year
No,
for the
no.
Dodgers. So you have to wonder where, he'll be fine during the season, but when they need it most, you have to kind of wonder about if he'll be able to step up and give it to him. And then, they signed Tyler Chatwood from the Rockies to a 3 year deal, who's a pretty solid starter also. So their pitching staff's going to be okay, I think. And then those position players, I think I saw something where Kyle Schwarber is in spring training in the best shape he's ever been in, and all this stuff. So
Right, right.
there's there's high hopes. And then Chris Bryant's a former MVP. So
Sure he is. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So I think that I have to agree with you again here that I see the Cubs winning that division. It'd be hard for me to sit here and say that one of those three teams, the Pirates, the Reds, or the Brewers, are going to win that division. It
Right.
doesn't seem likely. Um, so I think you have to go with the Cubs there.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. So we'll end up with NL West then. You have the Dodgers in the NL West, who got to the World Series last year, took it to a Game 7. This is going to be a pretty competitive division though, because
Yeah.
the Rockies got into the playoffs. It was the 1 game playoff they lost last year, and they have a lot of good talent on their team. You have the Diamondbacks, who also made the playoffs last year. Um,
In fact, they played each other, right? The
th-
Rockies and the
that's
Diamondbacks.
right. The
Yeah.
Diamondbacks won, and then they got swept by the Dodgers in the divisional series, but
Right.
they made it nevertheless. The Padres, who they did sign Eric Hosmer, as we mentioned, from the Royals. Excuse me, and um, who else? They signed. Who else did they sign? Maybe they didn't sign anybody. Maybe I'm thinking of Will Myers, who's still there. He's a pretty good player.
Yeah, he's still there. Right. He's still
Absolutely,
there.
absolutely. And then the Giants are the ones that signed Evan Longoria.
Right.
Excuse me, they traded for Evan Longoria
Right.
as well as Andrew McCutchen.
Right.
And this is an even year. So, they won the World Series in 10, 12, 14.
Right.
Couldn't do it in 16, but it's another even year, so they got that going for them, which is nice.
Well,
So yeah, I think maybe one of the most competitive divisions overall, I feel like.
yeah, I agree with you. I just got finished saying the Central Division was the most competitive of the ones we discussed. But now
Right.
that we're at the National League West, I think you got to call that division the most competitive in baseball because you have defending National League champions there. You have you have two of the wild card teams, the two wild card teams there. And I think I said this one time to you as we were talking, offset at one time previously that if Madison Bumgarner doesn't go driving on his little moped and hurt himself last year, the Giants may end up giving the Dodgers quite a run for that division. So, let's face it. You talked about they traded for Longoria, they signed McCutchen, they still have Buster Posey, former National
Right.
League MVP.
Right. Right.
They got Bumgarner. Bumgarner may be the best pitcher in baseball when he's healthy. So, and they've got a really good manager. So, I
Yeah.
think the
Yeah.
Giants could be the wild card this year, and I don't mean wild card in the National League. I mean the wild card in that division that
Right.
comes up and steals it from the Dodgers.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, they're a team where, if you look at the records last year, they had a pretty bad record, but they're not a bad team. It's just one of those
Right.
years where it's kind of they're almost like their worst case scenario of what happened to them last year. So I could easily see them bouncing back and making a playoff push this year, pushing the Dodgers. Um, and we you mentioned this at the start of the podcast. Justin Turner for the Dodgers, who had such a good year last year. I think it was an All Star. Broke his wrist just recently in the last day or two, and I think I saw where he doesn't have to have surgery if I'm
Yeah,
seeing
I
that
think you're right
correctly.
about that.
So it
Yeah.
may not be as long of a stint on the DL as it could be, but still he's going to miss some somewhat significant time.
Right.
So that's going to affect them. But then you still can count on Kershaw, um, to do his thing most likely. I mean, I don't see him dropping off at all
No.
there. So I mean,
And
but
they still got some really good young position players.
right, right, and then the Diamondbacks and Rockies, who we touched on a little bit. They're going to hit, especially in Colorado with the way the air is that everybody talks about, and they have a lot. They have Arenado and Blackman are as good as any two hitters in baseball, I think.
Right.
And then you look at
I agree.
you look at the Diamondbacks with Goldschmidt, um, and well, I was going to say JD Martinez, but they don't have him anymore. The Red Sox signed
Yeah.
him, but um, Goldschmidt still makes them go in the middle of their lineup. I just don't think either of those teams are going to pitch enough to make any major noise. Maybe they battle for a wild card spot again like they did last year, but I think it's going to come down to the Dodgers and Giants. Who would you pick between those two teams?
Well, I think you have to look at pitching. I mean, pitching is really the key, and I have to side with the Dodger pitching just a little bit.
Okay.
They got Maeda, they got Kershaw, they've got a couple of the guys coming back from injury. They've got um, what's the closer's name?
Oh, Jensen.
Henley Jensen. Yeah,
Yes.
Henley Jensen. So he's one of the best closers in baseball. They got a pretty solid bullpen. The Giants have Bumgarner. They have a few other guys as well.
Cueto and Samardzija. Yeah.
Cueto and Samardzija. Exactly. Samardzija hasn't exactly been lights out,
Right.
but
Right.
Cueto's very effective. But I just think overall, if I had to pick it, I would have to go with the defending champs.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. They got to the World Series last year, and obviously hoping to repeat that. So, if you look at the teams we took to win the division there, I think you'd have to consider those teams the favorites most likely. Um,
Right.
so if we stay in the National League, which we just talked about, who are two teams that stand out for you to grab those two wild card spots and play in that one game playoff?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give one of them to the Giants. I mean, we just
Okay.
got done talking about how close that race was going to be, so I
Right.
think one of them's got to go to the Giants.
Right.
And I think if the Mets caveat, if the Mets pitchers can stay healthy, I think the Mets will get that other wild card.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, I think that we made a pretty good case for the Giants, so I'd go with them as well. We basically said we could see them win the division, so I think they can certainly, if things go up for them, get that wild card spot. And then in terms of the wild card spot, um, let's see, I'll go a little different direction here. I'll go with
All right.
I'll go with the Rockies again to get the other wild card spot. I think that
Okay.
they're gonna hit. They're gonna hit enough. Especially I think they have one of the better home field advantages um, in baseball. So I think you're gonna see three playoff teams from the NL West again this year, much like you did last year, except you just trade the Diamondbacks for the Giants this year.
Okay. All right.
So all right. So looking at the American League now, I'll go ahead and start there. I think that Boston gets in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they have like when I just alluded to. They did sign JD Martinez, who
Right. Right.
can be a legitimate 40 home run guy like he was for the Diamondbacks, especially in Boston there at that short left field wall. Um, a lot of young guys that Rafael Devers, who came up mid-season for them last year, is going to be their everyday third baseman. I think he's only 21 years old, something like that. And they got a lot of young outfitters that are good as well. I think they'll secure a wild card spot, and then that other one, I'm going to give it to. Let's see here. Let's see. Um, yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
It's a tough
it's a
decision,
tough
isn't it?
decision. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe the Angels or somebody from the Central. So, um, I think I'll go ahead and give it to the Angels right now. I think
Okay.
that, like we said, I think the White Sox are a little. They're on the cusp, but they're going to be a little too early this year. So I'll give it to the Angels. I think Trout's going to have a big year again. I mean, he hasn't shown that any reason why he wouldn't.
Right.
If they can get some quality pitching out of Otani, who I think that's going to be kind of his forte this year. I think you'll see him transition more into a pitching role,
Right.
more than a hitting role as the season goes on. So I'm going to say the Angels and the Red Sox for wild card in the American League.
All right. Well, I agree with you on the Red Sox. I mean, obviously, we talked about how the Yankees and the Red Sox were going to battle it out for that division. So I think the Red Sox, obviously, I think are strong enough to grab one of those wild card spots. I'm going to go a little bit different than the Angels. I'm going to go with Minnesota to get back and
Okay.
get one of those wild card spots. I think they've got a solid manager in Molitor. I think he really did wonders with that team last year. They still have some solid pitching. They still got some pretty good position players. They don't have any what I would call superstars, but I think they've got a solid ball club. So I'm going to go with the Twins to come back in the wild card again next year.
Okay. All right. So we have our playoff teams picked. So let that record stand that before the season, those are kind of our consensus playoff teams. We'll see how it falls out here in this coming season. I did want to get your thoughts on just kind of an overarching topic, which is it seems like they talk about it every year, but it's maybe even been more of a little bit of talk this year. That's the kind of just the overall pace of play of baseball. So
Right.
see a lot of talk about how we're going to speed the game up, how we're going to make the game, and ultimately they're trying to speed it up to attract not only more fans but younger fans who
Right.
seem to get impatient with the game. What are your thoughts on them trying to do that, and ultimately, is it worth trying to do that, or is it just, hey, if you're going to be a baseball fan, you're going to be a baseball fan, and let's not fool with all these little rules that they're changing.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough situation there because on the heels of that argument of what we're about to talk about, the Major League Baseball announced that next year, 2019, the Yankees and the Red Sox are going to play a series in Japan. Or
Right, right,
so,
right.
all right, so no, it was London, wasn't it? It was London they were going to play
Well,
at. I think that was it.
yeah, I saw they were going to play an international series, but the city escaped me now. I have to check on that.
I think it was London. Now
Okay,
you can be checking while I'm talking to
okay,
make sure, but I'm pretty sure it was London. But anyway, I bring it up to say that you know why would Major League Baseball do that? Well, they want to grow the game, obviously, just like football is trying to grow their game overseas, and they want to attract a different demographic of viewer or of fan. Uh, so I think for the younger generation, you notwithstanding and some other baseball type guys notwithstanding, the younger generation is the video game generation. They want action, they want it quickly. Okay,
right.
and I think baseball, is such a deliberate sport, and it's a slow sport, and it slows down even more when you get into the playoffs. So I say all that to say that you know to me, when a baseball game doesn't start till 8:25 in the playoffs and it's not over till midnight, you're not going to attract a lot of young kids because they're asleep, and you're going to lose a lot of people, at that hour as well. So I think that it's good that they're trying to speed up the game. Now, the question is, how do you go about doing that? Okay, and I think limiting mound visits, yeah, that might help a little bit. But to me, the way you would do it is I think you need a pitch clock, and I think you need a clock on the batter. In other words, the batter's got to get in the box within a certain amount of time. None of this stepping out of the box,
Yeah.
grabbing some dirt and rubbing it between your hands, looking at your bat from different angles.
Right.
I mean, just get in the box and play baseball, okay? And I think that's where you can speed it up some. And another thing I think that hurts baseball right now is the game of baseball has changed so much. In other words, now it's a walk, a strikeout, or a home run, and that doesn't lend itself. That lends itself to periods of inactivity. Okay,
Right.
as opposed to the bunt or the ground ball or the hit and run or whatever it may be. So that's another problem with the game right now.
That
So I don't know.
that's actually a good point because when you hear people talk about the game slowing down, they'll talk about mound visits or times in between pitches, which are fair points. But you brought up a point about the strikeouts and the walks and stuff. Whereas if a batter's going to strike out, obviously he has to see three strikes.
Right,
So
exactly.
and a lot of times it's not three consecutive. So you see a lot of 2-2, 3-2 counts. If a guy's taking big swings up there, he's going to be fouling some off probably at times. That takes a lot of time too. That a lot of people don't even realize, and that's something that you ultimately can't regulate because there's just no way to do it. I mean, and a bat is going to be an at bat. regardless of how you try to hold it like that. But I think that the pitch clock thing is interesting. I think I know they did that. I think they introduced it a couple years of the AA and AAA levels. Um, and just to be honest, I'm not sure if they're still doing that or not. I guess I'll find out fairly quickly if they're still doing
Yes, you
that.
will.
In Pensacola, but yeah, that's I think if you talk to pitchers, that's something they're not a fan of, just because they feel like they're being rushed most likely. And then and just in turn, if you talk to hitters, the thing you hear is, okay, if there's no action on the pitch, whereas he doesn't swing, or it's not in the dirt or anything like that, and he just takes it. He doesn't get out of the box. So what you want guys to do to speed that up.
Right.
What seems reasonable, but I'm sure some hitters will say, I have a routine of what I'd like to do, and that's you're affecting my routine and things like that. So I'm not sure there's a great answer. This year it's the mound visits. They seem to be harping on where, and I don't know the exact number, but I think it was five. It was what, 5 or 6 total in the game now they limit you
I
to,
think so. Yeah, I think so.
and then
Yeah.
after that, each visit you have to take the pitcher out or something like that. Um, so that's interesting, I guess, and it's something they're going to keep talking about. So
Yeah, I think I don't think that's a good way to do it. I think I think the mound visit rule is good the way it is. I mean, you can visit a pitcher every inning if you want to, but once you go out there the second time, you got to take him out.
yeah,
I mean, and I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with pitchers who stall, and actually, I think it's the batters that stall that spend more time than it is the pitchers, to be
right,
honest with you,
right,
because they step out and do all this crap, and the pitchers, they'll do a little bit, but I think they get pretty ready to throw the baseball. I think what you need to, one of the things you could do is, call a real strike zone. I mean, call it from the letters to the knees. I
right,
mean, force guys to swing the bat. I mean,
right.
that's the way you got to do it. I mean, it'll only take a few guys getting rung up on 3 pitches to realize that they better swing the bat. I mean, so that would be a way to speed it up as well, because right now when you like you said, when you start running the count to 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2, then you foul off 3 or 4 pitches. Now you got a 9 and 10 pitch at bat, and then you end up walking the guy. Well, the average fan, that's boring. Okay,
Right, right,
that's absolutely boring. So yeah, I think there's other ways to do it besides the pitcher visits. I thought that was a cop out. The way they went about that one.
right. Yeah, I mean, look, it's like I said, there's something they're going to keep talking about, and I don't know that there's ever going to be a solution that everybody can totally agree on that definitely makes the game shorter that everybody's happy with. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see going forward. So I want to end with something that we usually do with our guests here. Let's play a little bit of rapid fire.
Okay.
Baseball MLB edition. So I'll throw out a question, and you can give your rapid fire answer, and I'll give one as well here, and to wrap up our baseball preview.
That
Okay.
sounds good. I'm ready.
All right. So as we sit here right now, best current baseball uniform.
The Yankees.
The classic pinstripes,
The
right?
classic pinstripe. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you talk about classic uniforms, that is the most classic. But I'm going to go with the Diamondbacks right now. I think that
Okay.
what they've got going on there, uh, specifically with their home uniforms, I kind of like what they're doing with the red and gold, and I think they have some of the best gear as well, just t-shirts and shorts and just all that. I'm not sure about their dark gray ways, but I'm going to go with the Diamondbacks.
That's fair enough.
Okay, all right. One current Major League Baseball stadium that you'd most like to visit that you have not visited.
Wrigley Field.
I'd have to agree with you there. That's if you've been able to hit Fenway and the original Yankee Stadium, which is no longer up. Wrigley
Right.
Field's kind of the last frontier that every baseball fan needs to get to.
Yeah, and I think that's. I mean, you and I have both been to. We've
Uh,
both been to Fenway. We've both been to the old Yankee Stadium.
that's right.
We've both been to Chavez Ravine, the Dodgers
That's
home.
right.
So we've been to the the 3 oldest ballparks
Right.
up until now. Wrigley's the only one, so
Right.
that's where I want to go.
Absolutely. Okay. Best player in baseball right now.
Best player in baseball right now?
Right.
Position player?
Right.
Mike Trout.
Okay. Um, That's good. That's actually a good question. I didn't preview these either. I'm gonna go with Bryce Harper right now.
Okay.
I've said this before. I think that um, Trout has, I think, for lack of a better word, peaked as a player. I think that, I mean, his peak is obviously very high. I think, but this you're going to see this consistently. I think Harper may have a 65 or 70 home run season in him. I think his ceiling's just a little higher. Not that he'll ever even get there, but I think he's obviously a great player. And I think he may have a little even more in the tank. So I'm going to go with Bryce Harper.
Well, and let me throw this out. You mentioned Harper's ceiling being higher. I'll say that Trout's floor is higher. And what I mean by
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
I think Trout is a more consistent player when he's healthy than Harper is. Harper may have the higher ceiling, but he's got the lower floor. So in other words, you never know what you're going to get in there. You may get 65, 70 home runs, but then you may get 25 home runs.
I would totally agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I agree. You made a good choice. I think they're both good choices.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. Um, Next question. Who? I guess this is more of a prediction also, but who will be the worst team in baseball this year? Who have the least amount of wins?
Ooh, the Marlins.
That's well, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, you've heard nothing but not so good things come out of there, even with Jeter taking over. So that's a good one. But I'm gonna go with let's see here. I'm gonna go with the Braves.
All right.
I don't think they have a lot going for them, and um, yeah, they are either and they're in the same division, so that should tell you something about that division as well. There,
There you go.
for sure. Okay. Favorite baseball memory as a kid?
Oh gosh. I would have to say, my favorite baseball memory was when I was growing up in New York. My dad took me to a lot of Mets games. I mean, we went to the Polo Grounds when the Mets used to play there in 1963 before Shea Stadium. We went to a lot of Shea Stadium games because one, it was easier to get to Shea Stadium from where we lived, and two, the tickets were easier to come by. But Yankee tickets were almost impossible to get in the 60s because they were coming off that long run of World Series, the 50s and early 60s. They started to go downhill in the mid 60s, but they still had Mickey Mantle, they still had Roger Maris, they still had guys you don't know had never heard of, Joe Pipitone, Tom
Right,
Tresh,
right.
Mel Stottlemyre on the mound. I mean, they had a tremendous ball club. And I remember my dad finally got tickets to see the Yankees. It was 1967, I believe, and we took the subway out to the Bronx and went to Yankee Stadium. They were playing what was it? The Kansas City Athletics. The A's were in
Okay,
Kansas
right,
City at the time,
right.
so it was the Kansas City Athletics, and we had seats in the right field bleachers and watched Mickey Mantle play, and that's my favorite baseball memory.
All right, absolutely. So that's obviously quite a throwback baseball memory there, but mine's not quite as thrown back. But um, you obviously remember, but you and I went to the Royals White Sox game in Chicago.
Yes,
I guess when I was growing up as a young child, Frank Thomas was my favorite baseball player.
right,
So we went to what was then Comiskey Park. It's the same stadium. They call it something different now, but
right.
saw them play Kansas City, which is fun. And I'm sure you remember the day better than I do because I was so young. But that was probably my greatest baseball memory as a kid, for
Yeah,
sure.
I remember the day well. I mean, we flew up there from Nashville and got a hotel, and I remember it was raining. We weren't even sure they were going to play the game,
Right.
and in fact, it was delayed. I think 2 or 3 hours, if I remember. And we were sitting in the stadium and trying to figure out what to do, and they eventually played the game, and we went back to the hotel on the subway. So yeah, it was a neat outing.
So absolutely. All right. Next question. What this can be phrased one of two ways. What pitch do you think is the toughest pitch to hit? Slash, if you were a pitcher, what pitch would you want in your arsenal as your number one pitch?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I, Personally, I think the changeup is the toughest pitch to hit.
Okay.
All right, and the reason I say that is because if you've got a really good fastball and you can throw a good changeup with say 10 to 12 mile an hour difference on it, I think that's almost impossible to hit, especially if the batter's looking for the fastball because he doesn't know it's coming. All right.
Right.
But if I was a pitcher, I think I would want a cutter, and I think if you could throw it, I mean, Mariano Rivera got to the Hall of Fame or will be in the Hall of Fame based on one pitch. You
Right.
know,
Right.
so I think if you can throw an effective cutter, and you can, if you're a righty and you can saw off, left-handed batters, and if you're a lefty, you can saw off the right-handed guys. I think it's hard to hit, and I think it's a very effective pitch. So those are my answers.
Okay. So I think that if I was a pitcher, the pitch I would want is a one to be able to throw as a hard sinker. I think that
Okay.
if you can have a sinker that you can get up there around 94, 95, when you have that thing on, it's guys are either going to not hit it or they're going to pound it into the ground, and
Right.
your infield is going to go to work on it. So I think that'd be my pitch. Hardest to hit, I think that. And I didn't face a lot of these, I guess, because I didn't play at a super high level of baseball. But it would be the cutter, which you alluded
Right.
to with Rivera. And if you talk to a lot of hitters, they'll say that's the hardest pitch to hit in a game is a cutter. Because just it looks just like a fastball, but it has delayed action on it.
Right.
So even if you recognize that it's going to be in a certain speed range, it's still very hard to hit. So I'll go with that answer. All right.
Okay.
Next question. Best seat at a Major League Baseball game. So if you could sit anywhere, what would be your best seat? Would it be behind home plate, behind the dugout? What's your ideal seat?
Yeah. I would say for me, I'd like to be like right behind the dugout.
I would agree with that. That'd be my answer too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you can just take in more of the ballpark and
I
see
agree.
see a few more of the angles than sitting right behind home plate.
I agree.
All
Yeah.
right, and we'll wrap up with this one. You talked a little bit about the Yankees earlier, and this has been um, kind of a question among us off air, here and there in the past. But the greatest Yankee of all time.
Wow. Oh man, that's a tough one.
And this is
The
not
great.
again. This is not like naming the greatest Florida Marlin of all time. There's many candidates you could pick from here.
That's exactly right. I mean, I guess. Gosh, the greatest Yankee of all time. Oh gosh. Yeah. I'm going to have to go Joe DiMaggio. Uh,
Okay, all right,
and the reason I say that is because Babe Ruth wasn't always a Yankee. Lou Gehrig, gosh, it's so hard to say this. That Lou Gehrig, he didn't play a full career because of
right.
his illness. But Mickey Mantle, gosh, Mickey Mantle was a
Well,
great baseball player. But
well,
I just think Joe DiMaggio. I think he was the most consistent, and he was kind of the face of that franchise for 15, 16 years. Um, I just have to go Joe DiMaggio.
okay. Yeah, I mean that's certainly not an outlandish
There-
choice by any means. Yeah. Go
There's no
ahead.
bad choice. Let me put it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, but I'm gonna have to go with Derek Jeter. I think that
All right.
obviously not from the same era that a lot of those guys you just named, but I think the sixth most hits of all time in baseball history.
Right.
Right, or I believe it's sixth all time. Five-time World Series champion.
Right.
Just all the things he did as a Yankee, most hits as a Yankee. Um, yeah, it's got to be Jeter from in my opinion. I think he epitomizes Yankees baseball, especially in the new era to where they ever since a lot of those guys left, like Mantle and those guys, they went through some tough times in the '80s and early '90s, and just for the modern baseball fan, Jeter's the quintessential Yankee, I think.
I would agree. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So, all right. So that I think that'll wrap up our first our inaugural MLB preview episode
Okay.
here on the Press Box Podcast. We laid out some picks for the division and wild card rounds, and we'll see how those play out here as the season progresses and starts. Late next week. And like we said, we'll be back in April after a few weeks of the season have happened, and give our initial thoughts on what's going on, and talk to Uncle Joe about some Nationals baseball and his impressions, and what he's thought of Gio Gonzalez's first 1 or 2 starts as well. Who we know, he'll have. I believe he'll have some thoughts on that one. Let's just put it that
I
way.
would think he would. Yeah, I don't think we'll have any problem getting any thoughts out of him on that one.
Absolutely. Well, this is a good episode. I enjoyed it.
I did too.
Absolutely. So for Ralph, this is Joseph Miranda signing off on the Press Box Podcast. Stay with us. We'll be back soon.